With 2 weeks left, nearly 30% of California voters say they're undecided in this race. Only two of the candidates will continue to the November general election. Tonight, we speak with four top polling candidates. Democratic Congresswoman Barbara Lee, representing Oakland and Alameda County, former chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff of Burbank. He's a former chair of the House Intelligence Committee. Democratic Congresswoman Katie Porter of Irvine in Orange County. She is a former deputy chair of the House Progressive Caucus. And Republican Steve Garvey, a former great with the Los Angeles Dodgers and San Diego Padres. Many think he should be in the Hall of Fame. The question is, should he be in the halls of Congress? Thank you to all for coming.
Our goal tonight is to explore the positions of all of these candidates. Our questions will focus on the job and the responsibility of a U.S. senator. The candidates will have 60 seconds to respond to questions, 30 seconds for rebuttals at the discretion of the moderators, and 15 seconds for follow-ups. Conan.
So let's start with inflation. It was supposed to tick down last month, but it went up. We noticed in the last debate, you spent, at least the Democrats here, spent a lot of time talking about the minimum wage. You wanted to double the federal minimum wage. You wanted to increase the minimum wage here in California. There was Congresswoman Lee talked about a $50 an hour minimum wage. The minimum wage is going up in California in April for fast food workers of major chains to $20 an hour. Already, McDonald's, Jack in the Box, Chipotle say they're going to raise the cost on the menu to pay for all that. I believe Pizza Hut said they're laying off 1,200 drivers. I want you to address to voters who think, well, listen, this just makes the cost of living worse. Speak to that and to the problem of inflation and how so many people watching tonight believe their money is worth less tomorrow than it is today because of the inflation rate. Can a senator do anything about it? Congressman Schiff, we'll have you start. You have a minute.
There's a lot that a California senator can do about this. And you're right. People are working harder than ever. The problem today is not that people aren't working. The problem is they are working and they just can't make enough to get by. And the answer is not paying people less to try to keep inflation down. The answer is bringing down the cost of goods, bringing down the cost of housing, bringing down the cost of childcare. We want to strengthen our economy. We need to make sure that people can have good access to quality childcare, and particularly women can participate in the workforce. That will raise the economy. But more than that, we need to bring down energy costs. We can do this with a windfall profits tax on oil companies. We can bring down the cost of housing by building a lot more housing. Conan, my family came to California when I was 11 in search for a better life. And we found it here. My wife, Eve, and yes, we're Adam and Eve, her family also came here in search of a better life, and she found it here. I want that to be true for future generations of Californians. And the way we can make that possible is by bringing down the cost of goods, and particularly housing.
Thank you. Congresswoman Porter, inflation.
Good evening, California. We need to make sure that Washington is focusing on our biggest challenge, which is the cost of living. Decade after decade, career politicians haven't focused on our challenges, including the cost of housing, the cost of childcare, the cost of elder care, the costs of college. Yes, we need to make sure that workers get paid a wage that reflects what they contribute at their companies and at their jobs. But we also need Washington to get in the game. Decade after decade, they haven't been there. You can't raise a wage an hour or two and close the tremendous gap that people face in trying to afford childcare or college. My colleague, Representative Schiff, says, for example, that he wants to bring down the costs of childcare, but he isn't on either of the two major Democratic bills that would do that. He's not on a bill to provide rental assistance to people for housing, although all of these things are in his plans. That's the gap between Congressman Schiff and candidate Schiff.
Thank you, Mr. Garvey.
Well, these career politicians, 3 years ago, they were on the watch that has created what it is today. When the president took office, he signed 90 different bills. And what he did was he turned off gas and oil. And when that happens, energy goes through the roof. It affects all elements of our life. But what really happened is the overspending in Washington, which caused inflation. And it goes from the table in the morning, where mom's trying to figure out the week whether she can feed her children as she wants to to the gas station where we've seen gas go up $2, $3. And by the way, when I go to the gas station at 7:30 in the morning, hardworking Californians are going there. They're not buying 10 gallons. They're buying $10 worth of gas. And then it goes to schools and affordability. But this was all on their watch.
Thank you, Mr. Garvey. Congresswoman Lee, you're sticking by the $50 an hour minimum wage?
Let's be honest. First of all, we have to talk about what it takes for people to live in California. We have a huge affordability crisis. The cost of living is much too high. First, at the federal level, of course, we have to raise the minimum wage. We haven't raised it in a decade. $7.25 to $17 in 2025. Okay, great first step. But in California, for example, we have $16 an hour now. And believe you me, every single study that you have seen that has been written about the affordability crisis in California, people are working 2 and 3 jobs just to pay rent, just to afford child care. We have to think about and talk about a living wage. What does it mean to have a living wage in California? Over $100,000 in many parts of California. People are just barely surviving. They're living on the edge. So we have to think about what it takes to make sure that people can afford to live in California. That means a living wage.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Mr. Schiff, you were mentioned by Congresswoman Porter. You have 15 seconds to respond to that.
Conan, there's nothing easier than putting your name on a bill. Where you see the real legislators is they write their own legislation. I've introduced numerous bills to bring down the cost of child care, to make sure that we build child care into new federal facilities, that we raise the wages for child care workers. We have a real scarcity, not of people willing to do child care work, but of people willing to do it for poverty wages. So my legislation would raise incomes for those incredibly essential workers. I don't think any family should be spending more than 5 or 10% of their income on child care, so I would provide a tax credit as well for child care.
So a follow-up to this, a tremendous amount of federal money has been spent over the past 2 administrations. Recently, the head of the Congressional Budget Office on Capitol Hill said that the deficit is will be, what, $2.6 trillion in 10 years. He called it an existential threat to the economy because the service on the debt will be so great, it'll crowd out federal spending, including a lot of the programs you'll be talking about tonight. I'm just curious, do you consider the deficit a problem, or will it work itself out? Or if the federal budget needs to be cut, where would you cut? You don't have much time on this, 30 seconds. Congresswoman Porter, I'll have you start.
I think that we need to be fierce advocates for our tax dollars. We are all sending our money to Washington, and we should expect a return on that money. So I am proud to be a person who will do the oversight, who will push, and who will ask, are we getting a return? Is this bill going to invest in America's future, or is it just pork barrel spending to satisfy career politicians, corporate donors? So I'm going to champion investing in things like education and infrastructure, where it returns money to the United States.
The deficit's not an issue for you?
The deficit is an issue, and where we should cut it is wasteful military spending with the Pentagon, which has never passed an audit.
Thank you. Congressman Schiff, could you take that issue, the deficit?
Yeah, the deficit is a real problem, and I think a big part of the reason why it's a problem is that the wealthy and corporations are not paying their fair share. There are fewer than 800 families that combined own the wealth of more than half of the families in America. That's just wrong. We have to repeal the Trump tax cuts. I think we could restore balance to our budget if people were paying their fair share, if some of those high-priced ball players were paying as much effectively as the fans in the stands, the working fans. And I don't know if Mr. Garvey is with me on that. I think he's not with me on that, but I think that would help address some of the budget deficit we have.
Okay. Congresswoman Lee?
Yeah, the budget deficit is a problem. And let me tell you, when these Trump-era tax cuts expire, the billionaires must be part of paying their fair share. So we need to go back to the tax code and make sure that billionaires do pay their fair share. But it was said earlier that the Pentagon had not been audited. Well, it's myself who led with a Republican to insist that the Pentagon be audited. And we learned that the Pentagon very recently has flunked its 6th audit. So it's about time that Democrats follow myself and will in the Senate to audit the Pentagon and to claw back that money.
Thank you very much.
And waste, fraud, and abuse.
Mr. Garvey, is there anything in the federal budget you'd cut?
Well, let me just go back. Of course the debt is serious. Over the last 4 years, we've seen the debt go sky high. Why? Because it's excessive spending by government. And my fellows up here, they understand that. It's been on their watch. 60 years of combined congressional work has caused this spiraling debt to go higher and higher. So let's get back to cutting interest rates. The Fed, just the last week, even though the administration kept touting that all of a sudden this inflation has gone down, it hasn't.
Thank you, Mr. Garvey.
At least two of you have talked about military spending in the Pentagon, so let's talk about military readiness. U.S. Army has not met their recruitment goals in nearly a decade. Secretary of the Air Force has recently expressed serious concerns about Air Force preparedness, the readiness here. Given the state of the world right now, is the U.S. sending enough? Are they spending enough on defense? Are we prepared for any kind of major conflict? Congresswoman Porter, you have 60 seconds.
There's no doubt that the world is facing new dangers and our country is facing new threats. I have led on issues, for example, of the threats that we're facing in the Indo-Pacific from China and other regional powers. This is a time to be investing in diplomacy. Yes, we have the strongest military in the world, and I particularly want to support the amazing people like my brother who step up and who serve, who are veterans and service members, and we need to recruit our best and brightest into the military. At the same time, we have to make sure that's where our tax dollars are going, to actually make us safer, not just to help huge corporations get richer through the Pentagon budget. And we have seen a number of failures in this regard. And so I think it's really important that we separate out those issues. How do we keep our men and women safe? How do we keep our country safe? That means someone who's going to look forward, look at the future, and understand the threats that are coming from AI, from cyber, and from new kinds of technology.
Mr. Garvey.
National defense is our single most important issue. Without that, everything else is irrelevant. Peace through strength. We have to remember that we're the torchbearer for democracy around the world. We have to have policy that shows our enemies that we're serious, we will address every issue when approached. But we also have to make sure our military is capable, technology-wise, militarily. We have to have the best equipment. So we need to make sure that our military is fully funded at all times.
Congresswoman Lee, you have 60 seconds.
I'm the daughter of a veteran, 25 years. He served in World War II, in Korea, served in Japan. He was a proud patriot, and he told me over and over and over again to make sure that our readiness was intact, but also that we protect our troops. And let me tell you, the Pentagon budget is excessive. It's $890 billion. We need to cut at least $100 billion out of the military budget and put into readiness and put into our troops. I lead each and every year in my effort to get past the People Over Pentagon Act, and in the Senate, I will do that. Military contractors, they're scamming the taxpayers. We tried and I worked with Republicans to claw back money that weapons dealers really stole from the Pentagon in terms of tax dollars. And so, no, we need to reduce the military budget, put more into readiness, into our troops, into our veterans, into our domestic needs, and we also need to put more into development and diplomacy instead of increasing the military budget.
Thank you, Mr. Schiff.
Colleen, my dad is 96. He joined the service at the end of World War II. He actually went to join the Marine Corps, but failed the physical. He had flat feet and bad eyesight. 2 weeks later, he went to join the Army, thinking maybe they had a different physical standard, maybe a different examining physician. Turns out, same standard, same physician. And the guy recognized my dad. And he said, "You really want to get in that bad?" And my dad said yes, and he was in the Army. He raised his 2 sons to have great respect for those who wear the uniform. We have a challenge recruiting because we don't pay our service members enough for the dangers that they have to face and the hardships their families have to face. And there are areas where we need to cut the Pentagon budget. I remember meeting with President Obama to discuss our deficit and debt problem, and one of my colleagues used the occasion to argue for more F-22s, something the Pentagon said they didn't need, we couldn't afford. And the president said, you know, if we're going to handle the deficit, I need to make national security decisions based on national security. And that's what we need to do.
Mr. Schiff, thank you. A follow-up question here. This will be 30 seconds. Ms. Lee, this goes to you first. I keep hearing the best equipment, training, readiness here. There have been a number of military crashes recently. Defense Department Government Accountability Office reports equipment is aging. All branches of the military need to rebuild, restore, and modernize. We have military bases here in the state of California that stretch from Southern California, San Diego, all the way north. We hear all the time, thank you for your service. But in reality, is Washington doing enough to service the service members, to protect them, to keep them safe? Ms. Lee, I start with you. 30 seconds, please.
It's a matter of priorities and how the Pentagon spends your tax dollars. The Pentagon needs to put more resources into readiness, into making sure that our troops are protected, rather than allowing these weapons dealers to steal taxpayer dollars. And that is exactly what's happening. That is why I worked with my Republican colleagues to expose what was taking place at the Pentagon just a couple of months ago. That's why I required now the Pentagon to be audited. It's flunked, as I said, 6 audits. We need to put those resources into our troops, into our veterans, and make sure that they're safe and have the equipment that they need.
Thank you. Mr. Schiff.
I've had the opportunity, and this is really, I think, the most rewarding part of serving in Congress, to visit our troops all over the world. I've been in these Ospreys that have tragically been crashing and killing our service members. There's no higher priority for me than making sure that our service members are safe. And part of what's so valuable about doing that oversight in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and elsewhere is getting the ground truth from people about whether they're well equipped, whether they feel they have the resources they need, because you don't often hear that from the generals in the Klieg lights in the hearing rooms. It's important to me to get the ground truth, and I do.
Ms. Porter.
I think that we need to be stimulating more competition among our defense contractors. For too many decades, Washington gave sweetheart deals to certain defense contractors through earmarks. And there is a candidate on this stage who has done that again and again, getting earmarks for his private corporate donors who are big defense contractors. So I think we need to be prioritizing making sure the people doing the work have the equipment they need. So I'm proud to lead bills to address food insecurity among veterans and to make it easier to get better military housing.
Mr. Garvey.
And I'll wrap all of this up by saying freedom has no cost to it. It's whatever it takes. And I think freedom in this country starts on the ground, in the air, and in the sea. And I agree. Whatever it takes to do this, and we have to be diligent, because we are the torchbearer for the world. We do continue to serve our allies, but let's make sure America's ready.
Mr. Schiff, I will give you 15 seconds for rebuttal for that comment from Ms. Porter.
Look, we have a strong disagreement over whether senators should bring back resources for their state. I believe that they should. Representative Porter doesn't believe they should. She prefers a political talking point. But look, I want to bring back billions, just as Feinstein did, to help people find shelter, to help people get food when they're hungry. And any senator who won't do that is going to be a gift to the senators from every other state of the union who will fight for resources for their state.
Thank you for your response.
I would like to respond.
Go ahead. 15 seconds.
The truth is, California only gets 2 senators. That'll be 2% of the earmarks. Yet we're 12% of the United States population. Earmarks are about inviting corruption, conflicts of interest, and rewarding people's donors. Don't believe, Representative Schiff has that track record. Look for yourself.
Congresswoman Porter, thank you.
As a journalist who has covered the Latino community for many years now, there's a lot of people I've talked to on the street who believe, they really believe from the bottom of their hearts that they're being used by your party, the Democratic Party, every time there's an election. You have promised an immigration reform time after time, over and over again, but even when you had control of the House, the Senate, and the White House, you failed to pass an immigration reform. Why should voters, Latino voters, trust you now on this issue? I'll start with you, Congressmember Porter.
Look, I'm someone who went to Washington to do things differently. I'm not satisfied with what Democrats or Republicans have been delivering. I'm of a generation who has only ever known the amazing contributions that immigrants make. The House of Representatives passed the Dream and Promise Act to help give status to deliver not just a pathway to citizenship, but we need to give citizenship now to our dreamers to provide protections for TPS. It went to the Senate where it died. That's why I'm running to shake up the Senate. I'm not going to offer you the status quo because the status quo has been unacceptable and not enough for millions of Americans. I'm tired of hearing about comprehensive immigration reform. I want to do it. I'm tired of talking about pathways to citizenship. I want to give people those opportunities. The chaos, the struggles we're seeing in our immigration system benefit big corporations who take advantage of undocumented labor to pad their bottom line, and it should stop.
Ms. Porter, thank you for your response. Ms. Lee, you've been in Congress for 26 years now. Do you bear any responsibility for this?
Let me first say that our Latino community should not trust us. They should grade us based on the work that we have done, our voting record, and exactly what we believe in, and just in terms of immigrants. One, I was born in El Paso, Texas, in an immigrant community in a border town. Secondly, I understand the importance of comprehensive immigration reform because border security will not work without comprehensive immigration reform. Thirdly, it is a shame and disgrace that we cannot allow our DACA students, our dreamers, to become United States citizens. And in the Senate, that would be the first thing I would do in terms of making sure that I fight with Senator Padilla to ensure the pathway to citizenship for our dreamers, as well as our farm workers. We haven't protected our farm workers the way we should. The Farm Worker Modernization Act should have been passed by the Senate by now. It hasn't been. And so it's very important that Latino voters understand that there's some who may not believe that immigrants deserve the dignity and the humane treatment, but our record speaks for itself and should grade us on our record.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. Your time's up. Thank you. Mr. Schiff, you've been in Congress for 24 years almost now this year. What is your take on this?
Well, I think you're absolutely right that when Democrats controlled the House and the Senate, as we did during the first 2 years of the Biden administration, as we did for a period during the Obama administration, the Democratic Party didn't get this done. And that's on our party. Now, we're never going to get the help from the Republicans. Mr. Garvey's party believes that this is a political gift that we'll never stop giving. They're not going to help us with this. We're going to have to do it ourselves, which means we're going to have to get rid of the filibuster and pass a truly comprehensive immigration reform. I'm going to go to the Senate to work with Alex Padilla and fight to make sure that happens. It's unconscionable that we haven't done it. I remember speaking to a farm worker who lives in Mexico, comes across the border every day, gets up at 1 in the morning, works in our fields for 8 hours in the 100-degree heat, then goes back through the port of entry for a few hours with his family, one of the most hardworking people I've ever met. He is deserving of a pathway to citizenship because of my record of advocacy and leadership. The Chirla Action Fund, one of the premier immigrant rights groups, has endorsed me. The United Farm Workers have endorsed me. They know I will be a champion in the Senate for truly comprehensive reform.
Thank you. Your time's up. Mr. Garvey, the recent bipartisan immigration bill, a historic one, was killed by Republicans 2 weeks ago, apparently because Donald Trump wants to keep the issue alive so he can use it in his presidential campaign. How can Latinos trust Republicans on this issue as well? And you have 60 seconds.
Well, first of all, it's an honor to be with the Latino community tonight. We've had 50 years of a wonderful relationship. And that's why, as your next elected U.S. Senator from California, I pledge that you will be my priority. You are the hardworking Californians who get up every day, have come here the right way to California, because this was your dream. And you're experiencing that dream, but you're not experiencing that dream through inflation, through other challenges, but you deserve to be protected. And that's why that 544-page bill could have been done by one swipe of the pen by the president. And all they needed was one page to say, secure the border, and let's stop illegal immigrants from coming to this country and infiltrating our communities and taking away from those people who are the heart and soul of California.
I'm talking about that bill. This is a follow-up question to all of you. That bipartisan border security bill was called the most conservative immigration bill in 40 years in our country. It would have raised the standards for asylum seekers. It would have provided more border security. It would have allowed border closures during surges of illegal crossings. The bill was supported by President Biden, but Senator from California, Alex Padilla, voted against it. How would you have voted, Ms. Lee? You have 15 seconds.
I would have voted no, quite frankly. For me, the bill was not meeting the standard that I insist on, and that is immigration reform should include comprehensive immigration reform. It should be humane. It should include provisions for it being orderly, and it should have due process. And this did not have any of that.
Thank you, Congressmember Lee. Mr. Schiff.
Alex Padilla had no seat at the table during these negotiations, nor did any other Hispanic caucus member, nor did any other border Democrat. It's not surprising the package turned out to be so lopsided. I would support a package that had a comprehensive immigration reform. This was not that.
Your time's up. Thank you. Ms. Porter?
I would have definitely voted no on the immigration package. It was against our American values. It demonized immigrants by trying to ignore the fact that they come here seeking a better life. The reality is our country needs immigrants. If we're going to have a strong economy in the future, we should be focusing on the real problems like fentanyl, human trafficking, and gun trafficking.
Mr. Garvey, if that bill comes around again, how would you vote?
Not the way it was laid out. There were too many things packed in there, too many things hidden. I would have voted against it.
Thank you, Mr. Garvey.
Let's turn to a fundamental issue to being a U.S. Senator, and that is war and peace. I'm going to ask a couple of yes or no questions. You can pretend that they're floor votes, A or nay, but then I'll give you an opportunity to explain. This week is the second anniversary of the Russian invasion into Ukraine. Can we stipulate that the three House Democrats would have voted for the Senate bill authorizing $60 billion in aid to Ukraine? That you would have voted for that?
Yes.
Mr. Garvey, would you have voted for that? Yes.
Yes.
Or no? Okay.
Excuse me.
All righty.
It would depend on what else is in that bill. And I'm not certain I would have voted for it.
Right. But did you read the Senate bill? Did you know what was in it?
Most of what was in it, but in the bill, there were provisions that I did not agree with.
All right. So let's ask, again, a couple of yes or no questions. These are floor votes. If the president has said on a number of occasions that the United States would deploy U.S. troops to aid Taiwan if there was an invasion by China. Do you support that platform, Congresswoman Lee? No? Yes, no?
No, I would not support that.
Right. Mr. Schiff?
I support the president's position.
Congresswoman Porter?
I would support safeguarding us from the threat of China.
Okay. So U.S. troops okay. Mr. Garvey?
No troops on the ground.
Okay. So if there was a resolution on the floor that said the United States stands with Israel in its determination there will be no peace in Gaza until the Hamas government is removed in the leadership position that it holds in the Gaza Strip. We support that declaration by the Israeli government. Yes or no, Congresswoman Lee?
No, I support a ceasefire. That's the only way
Congressman
Israel
Mr.
will be secure and
Yes.
the Palestinians.
I'm sorry. You vote yes for that, Mr. Schiff?
Yes, I would.
Okay. Ms. Porter?
I would
Yes
vote,
or no?
I would vote no because
Okay, you can
Israel-
explain later, but you vote no. Mr. Garvey?
No ceasefire.
Okay, so again, along the same lines, we'll flip it. Would you vote for a resolution that said Israel has to impose an immediate ceasefire right now, no conditions, unconditional ceasefire, end the war? Congresswoman Lee?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Schiff?
No.
Ms. Porter?
No.
Mr. Garvey?
No.
Okay, I'll have you explain those. But in doing so, I'd like you also to express your sentiment towards what the 45th President of the United States has said, and many people in the United States. America first. They want us disengaged from the world. Donald Trump has said on a number of occasions that he questions whether we should be in the NATO alliance, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. There's concerns about us pulling out. What is the role of the United States in the world in terms of American foreign policy? And you have 60 seconds. Congresswoman Lee, we'll start with you.
global peace and security has got to be a priority for our foreign policy. And let me just explain what I mean. I was the former chair when we were in the majority of the Appropriations Committee that funded all of our development and diplomacy, preventing wars. We funded it to I believe it was about $60 billion. Defense was about $840 billion. We need to rebalance our foreign policy. We need to make sure that we put more into preventing wars, into development and diplomacy, and reduce the military budget. In many ways, that is the only pathway to peace. The United States needs to lead in seeking a peaceful world, and that is the only way this planet is going to survive. And yes, we have many challenges. The military option is going to always be there, but we must put more of our investments into preventing wars, into development and diplomacy, humanitarian needs, and helping young people, especially throughout the world, understand that they have a future.
Thank you, Congressman Schiff. America's role in the world.
Well, first of all, Israel has a right to defend itself. It was horribly attacked on October 7th. And I don't see how there can be a lasting peace as long as a terrorist organization is governing Gaza and threatening to attack them over and over and over again, nor do I see how there can be a permanent ceasefire while that is true. Nevertheless, Israel must make every effort to avoid civilian casualties, and we must make every effort to get the parties to a two-state solution. Turning to the former president in Ukraine, Ukrainians just lost Avdiivka, a city that they had gained in reclaiming part of their land. That was a terrible loss to Ukraine. It was a terrible loss, I think, to democracy. And it was occasioned in part because Republicans in Congress would not approve aid to Ukraine, which we should approve immediately. And I'm calling on the president, if Congress won't act, to use seized Russian assets to help fund Ukraine in its war effort. We remain the indispensable nation in the world. We cannot abdicate that responsibility, neither in the Middle East nor in Ukraine.
Congresswoman Porter.
The United States should be a beacon for freedom, for democracy, and for human rights. That's the touchstone that should guide our foreign policy, and we should be centered on those three values with every country in the world. I think it is important to recognize that this conflict in Gaza, the result of the horrific attack by Hamas, is one in which the parties to the conflict must determine what will be a lasting ceasefire for them. We can't just pass resolutions and make it so. The United States needs to support peace. We need to recognize, some on this stage will not, we need to recognize the incredible humanitarian disaster unfolding in Gaza, and we need to be firm and clear to Israel as our ally that we expect them to be a champion for peace and democracy. I think it is important that we live our values in this way and that we're investing in diplomacy. Donald Trump did terrible damage to our standing on the world stage, allowing Iran and Russia to grow in power, and we're all paying for the consequences.
Thank you. Mr. Garvey, there are plenty in the country who believe we are overextended. America first. We should focus on domestic issues and not be essentially the police officer for the world. Mm-hmm. What do you say?
Well, my campaign is based on common sense and compassion and consensus building. I think I said earlier, we're the torchbearer for democracy around the world. The world is watching us and how we support our allies. We're supporting our ally in Ukraine. We're looking at Taiwan, obviously, if they need help. As I've said, I support Israel yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and I believe all these countries we support have the right to their sovereignty. But as everybody looks at us for strength or weakness, we have to maintain that strength so that when people look at us, we are a deterrent for China, for Russia, for Iran, anyone who feels that they can become a threat to democracy.
Mr. Conan, I agree with Mr. Garvey. We should be the torchbearer of democracy. But how is that possible with Donald Trump?
Well.
How is that possible?
I appreciate that. Thank you very much for the you took up the seconds that he wasn't using. You could respond to that, Mr. Garvey. This comment from Congressman Schiff.
I didn't understand what he was talking about.
Well, let me explain.
Well, no. We appreciate that, Congressman.
Democracy with Donald Trump.
We appreciate it. Defend. His argument is that you voted for Donald Trump twice. You've said you haven't decided on what's going to happen. But defend, in your words, the foreign policy agenda of the previous president. 30 seconds.
I look into this camera and talk to the citizens of California one-on-one. As your senator, I will do everything to maintain your security. I'm not concerned with any one being. I'm concerned with 38 million Californians and 330 million Americans.
Ms. Porter, you have 15 seconds.
Look, the reality is Mr. Garvey has been unclear on where he stands with regard to Donald Trump. He's even said he might vote for Joe Biden. There is a Republican that is dangerous in this race, and that's Trump Republican Eric Early, who has said he will be 100% MAGA at all times.
Okay, thank you very much, Congresswoman. I appreciate that.
This debate is in partnership with LMU, and so our next question comes from Garrett Howard Jimenez. He's a sophomore at LMU studying marketing and management. Let's listen in.
As a younger person worried about the irreversible impacts of climate change, I'm wondering what actions you will commit to meaningfully address the issue.
All right, Mr. Garvey, you have 30 seconds to respond to that.
I think climate change is real. I think it's both man-made and both natural. I believe that 3 years ago there was a rush to judgment by the administration. I believe that gas and oil lines were turned off, which caused a tremendous strain on our economy. I think if it would have been more thought out, this would have had less stress. But I think the most important thing for us to do is always be aware that in this country, we do have problems in
Mr. Garvey.
what I'm saying. I'll just quickly to just wrap this up.
Time's up.
Okay,
Time's up.
thank you.
Ms. Porter, your response.
I am proud to be the candidate in this race who has spent time working in Congress on climate issues. I serve on the House Natural Resources Committee, and I've had bills passed into law to hold big polluters to account. Look, I'm different than Representative Schiff. He's taken corporate PAC checks from BP, from Sempra, from SoCalGas, and these are household names. They are polluters. So people can count on me to do Washington differently and deliver the climate change that we have been waiting for so long.
Congressman Schiff, you have 30 seconds to respond.
Well, first of all, my record in the environment goes back to my days as a prosecutor. When here in Los Angeles, I formed the first federal environmental crimes unit to go after big oil companies and prosecuted them. I prosecuted people for smuggling hazardous waste into Mexico. In the state Senate, I carried legislation to expand mass transit. And in Congress, I've carried legislation to expand cutting-edge research into renewable and green energy jobs, and also to crack down on the oil companies with a windfall profits tax on the oil companies. But I would like some time to respond to Representative Porter.
And you have 15 seconds to respond to that.
I don't think Representative Porter has been fully clear about her own record of taking thousands of dollars from people in the oil industry, thousands from Wall Street bankers, thousands from people in pharma industry, as Open Secrets has revealed. The problem with purity tests, as Representative Porter would like to establish, is invariably the people establishing them don't meet them. What Californians want is someone who can get things done, not that sets up false purity tests.
Ms. Porter, you have
I would like 30 seconds to respond. That's what he used was 30 seconds.
Rebuttal.
Please.
No, he had 30 seconds to respond to climate change. You have 15 seconds to respond to the rebuttal.
The truth is that the ad running against me by a dark, shady super PAC has been rated false. Don't take my word for it. Independent fact checkers at the Sacramento Bee have rated that ad false. Look, I made a choice when I ran for office to never take corporate PAC money. Representative Schiff made a different choice and has taken nearly $2 million, including from big oil, big banks, and big pharma.
Time's up. Congresswoman Lee, would you like to weigh in on climate change?
Well, listen, I don't think any of my opponents here tonight have ever lived in a neighborhood where a smelter was emitting toxic pollutants and chemicals throughout their childhood. I lived, as I said earlier, in El Paso, Texas, in a black and brown community where these toxic chemicals made everyone sick and have lasting health impacts. Climate justice is extremely important, and in the Senate, I would fight to make sure we pass the Green New Deal, which includes a just transition for our workers from a fossil fuel economy to a green economy, and pass all of our environmental justice laws so that we can make sure our frontline communities and our vulnerable communities are compensated and are able to live free from toxic pollutants.
I'm curious, nobody mentioned climate change, nobody mentioned nuclear. California has one remaining nuclear power plant, Diablo Canyon at Avila Beach. It represents 10% of the power grid. It runs rain or shine. It's not weather dependent. It does not contribute to global warming. It takes up a fraction of the space of the massive wind and solar farms that you've advocated. The governor has got the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to extend its life another 5 years. PG&E wants it another 15. The president is in support of nuclear. Can't meet our climate goals without it. I'm just curious, A, do you support the extension of Diablo Canyon, and does nuclear have a role in fighting climate change? Congresswoman Porter, you have 30 seconds.
I think Diablo Canyon needs to be safely decommissioned. I see this issue in my own backyard with nuclear waste from a energy plant.
So did you oppose the extension?
Yes, I would. As I just said, I would close Diablo Canyon. I think the timetable that's been established is effective. I do believe we have to be investing in new technology for energy. I'm a proud member of the Nuclear Fusion Caucus, which is a form of energy that doesn't produce any of the hazardous waste and have the risk of dangerous accidents like the current plants in Diablo Canyon.
Congressman Schiff, nuclear.
I support the governor's plan to decommission the plant, but I also think that nuclear energy has a role to play in our energy portfolio. Look, we're going to need to move to renewable energy. We're going to need to move to wind and solar. We're going to have new transmission to get energy from where it's developed to where it's utilized. But if we want to get ahead of the tipping point, and I really believe that we can get ahead of this tipping point, and we must. We need a Green New Deal. We need to move with a sense of urgency away from fossil fuels that are killing us and killing the planet, and to green energy sources.
But nuclear is part of it.
I think nuclear is part of it.
Congresswoman Lee?
Well, I support the decommissioning of the Diablo Canyon nuclear plant. I don't support nuclear power. I know that we have to have a just transition to a green economy, and that means the jobs that could be lost as a result of transitioning into a Green New Deal would have to be made certain that the workers had the job training, the retraining, and the workforce development, and the wages and benefits to be able to transfer out of a nuclear power plant. So I fully support decommissioning.
Right, but it was supposed to be decommissioned next year. It's been extended 5 years. Did you support the extension?
No, I don't support the extension.
Got it. Mr. Garvey?
I believe in nuclear energy. I believe this plant should become safe, and it should be viable. I think when we talk about clean energy, we talk about nuclear, we talk about wind, but there's always a place for gas and oil. This country runs on gas and oil. When it's all said and done, the people will decide. They're the ones that will tell us what they can afford and what they need.
Thank you.
All right, let's talk a little bit about AI, artificial intelligence. It presents legal, economic, and ethical challenges from security risks, consumer scams, privacy concerns. In fact, it really was the center of two major strikes this summer. We're talking about the WGA and SAG-AFTRA. 30-second question here. How can we have confidence you know how to get this under control? Mr. Schiff, we're going to start with you.
We're going to need to make sure we have a strong regulation of AI to protect the public good. We cannot afford to make the mistakes we did with social media, when essentially we gave them free rein to do as they would with this great experiment in which we were all the subject. So we need vigorous oversight of AI. I was proud to be out there on the picket lines, making sure that in these contracts for so many of the workers in the entertainment industry I represent, that they had protections against the AI potential threat to their jobs. We need to also address these changes in the workplace in the light of these new technologies to make sure that workers are protected.
Thank you. Your time is up. Congresswoman Lee, AI.
AI can be used for good. It can be used to harm people. I think it's important that right now we develop a regulatory environment so that it can be used for good. When you look at what has happened with technology, for example, and look at what happened to what's happening to our young people with no guardrails, we can use AI because it's here to stay to help with our climate crisis, to help with education, with healthcare. And also we have to be careful that it's not used to discriminate against people, because there's some real issues around racial justice that we have to address with AI. Now's the time to do it.
Thank you. Mr. Garvey, should it be regulated? What do you think?
Yeah. Excuse me. I see AI is here to stay. I see it doing wonderful things in medicine. I am concerned that it's starting to eliminate jobs, white-collar and blue-collar jobs. And I think once that happens, and also mind-altering AI, is starting to affect.
Should it be regulated?
I believe it's going to have to be regulated eventually, because once it starts affecting you and I, and once it starts affecting Californians, that's when we have to have regulation.
Mr. Garvey, thank you. Katie Porter.
As a lifelong consumer advocate, I can be trusted to take on the powerful interests that are backing AI. These are the same handful of ultra-wealthy billionaires who are backing ads that spread false truths about me. The touchstone ought to be safety, privacy, and competition. Those are the things we ought to be thinking about. And what we've got right now is none of those things. You can't make a toaster and put it in the marketplace and have it explode, but you can make an AI product, and people have that put it into the marketplace that reinforces racial discrimination and that is unfair and that hurts competition.
Your time is up.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the individual candidacies and your records. A couple of individual questions. Congressman Schiff, I'm going to ask you one. When you were a member of the California legislature, you're a former prosecutor, you introduced a number of bills that were crime-related. One, from what I understand, would have allowed 14-year-olds to be prosecuted as adults in some criminal cases. I believe you also authored a bill that would expand the three strikes law. You have said that you have learned from that experience. There were people at the time who said that you were insensitive to communities that were the subject of mass incarceration. Do you regret some of that legislation?
I certainly wouldn't author some of the legislation again, but Conan, I'm very proud of the fact that in those same years in the 1990s, I authored, along with my colleague Tony Cardenas, the Schiff Cardenas Crime Prevention Law, which has been described as, I think, one of the most successful long-term juvenile justice at-risk prevention programs in the state's history. I'm very proud of that. I'm proud of the fact that in Congress I fought for criminal justice reform. I fought for body cameras for police officers. And so I'm proud of my record. I'm proud that ever since I was a prosecutor, the safety of neighborhoods and people in my district and in California has always been my priority.
Thank you.
Mr. Garvey, this one is for you. For better or for worse, the U.S. Senate runs on seniority. You have committed to being a one-term senator, making you a lame duck on day one. So what do you believe is going to be like the impact or the influence that you're going to have in the Senate for 6 years?
I've built championship teams. I bring people together. And I've said on day one, we'll start a march to go to all 99 other senators and to meet with them and to tell them I'm there to build consensus. I'm there to bring people together. And a dysfunctional Washington needs a leader like myself, a new face with new ideas, somebody who's willing to get up in the morning and go to bat for all the people of California. I don't think my opponents are running for all the people. They're running for half the people.
But you haven't answered my question. What's going to be your impact or the legislation that you can introduce in the Senate?
Well, I graduated from Michigan State with an education degree and haven't had a chance to get to the classroom. But I think that's one of the most important things I can do is get back to reading, writing, arithmetic to make sure that the next generation of our children are the new leaders and capable.
Thank you, Mr. Garvey. Ms. Lee, the increase in violent crime in Oakland has forced many residents, many people, and many businesses to leave the city, including chains like Starbucks, Denny's, and Subway. All have chosen to close some of their stores due to safety concerns. This is your district, Ms. Lee, a city where our fellow journalists can't go out to work without an armed security guard to cover any story. Do you bear some responsibility, and what are you doing about it? You have 30 seconds.
Public safety is real in my district, throughout the state of California, and throughout the country. A couple of things we are doing now, and we must continue to do. One is working together with the federal government, state government, local government to make sure that we have the public safety team together to really address violent crime, because police officers need to be able to address violent crime, and the team that has come together, the public safety team, are addressing the public safety issues that we're faced with right now. But we have to deal with the underlying causes of some of these crimes. And that is, we have to get the guns off the streets of Oakland and of every community. We have to pass the assault weapon ban, get these AK-47s off the street and the ghost guns off the street. I intend to fight for that in the United States Senate.
Thank you.
Congresswoman Porter, let's talk about endorsements. 27 Democratic House members have endorsed Adam Schiff. 8 have endorsed Congresswoman Barbara Lee. Based on your website, which I checked just before we came on air here, you have one House member, Robert Garcia, out of Long Beach. You've said you didn't go to Washington to make friends. Why is that a good thing when a senator really needs to work with other people to come up with legislation and to get them to vote? You have 30 seconds.
I'm tremendously proud of the relationships I have with my colleagues, and they have put their trust in me, electing me deputy chair of the Progressive Caucus. That's the #2 spot, the largest caucus at the time in the House Democratic membership. I have also been twice selected to be either a subcommittee chair or a ranking member because these chair people sought me out. With regard to endorsements, with regard to endorsements, I would say that I'm tremendously proud to have the endorsements of folks like Attorney General Rob Bonta, State Senator Scott Wiener.
These are not your colleagues. These are not people who work in the House with you on a day-to-day basis. These are state senators. This is the Attorney General for the state of California and Elizabeth Warren out of the Senate. Why not your colleagues?
I'd have the endorsement of Robert Garcia, and I'm tremendously proud of that. And look, I have something important in common with Robert, which is I went to Congress to not be beholden to corporate special interests. I have a different position on earmarks. I don't think that we should be engaging in those special projects, lining people's pockets. And I have had people who have powerful special interests push back. They fund these people's campaigns, and it affects what they do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Porter. You have each been in the public eye for some time now, and we all know campaigning can be pretty difficult. Is there something you've learned about yourself during this campaign? Congresswoman Lee, you have 15 seconds.
What I have learned about myself during this campaign is that my background and experiences and many of the obstacles that I have faced in my life, so many Californians are facing them now. And what I have learned also is that I have been able to help so many people meet these challenges, and I intend to do that in the United States Senate.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. Mr. Schiff.
What I've learned is that Californians are really looking for somebody that can work with other people to get things done. There are real problems with housing. There's real problems with childcare. There's real problems with affording the cost of living. And I guess I've found about myself an ability to work with others, to attract others, to team up together. Not just my colleagues in Congress, but Speaker Pelosi, Barbara Boxer, many, the majority of statewide labor organizations.
Thank you, Mr. Schiff.
And that's an important skill for the Senate.
Mr. Garvey.
People around the state have come up to me and said, Steve, thank you. Bless you. Thank you for running. We need you. Career politicians have failed us. We need a new voice back in Washington, in the Senate. We trust you. We put our life in your hands.
But what have you learned about yourself during the campaign?
I started this campaign because I believe in the people. I love my state. I want to represent all the people of California, and I'll be relentless in the pursuit of that.
Mr. Garvey, we'll start with you. This is time for a wrap-up.
I didn't get to respond to the question at all.
Ms. Porter, your time.
Thank you. I would say that what I have learned about myself is that institutional Washington, which serves itself, doesn't want to change very much. And that we have seen this with big, dark money, even here in California, the greatest democracy in the United States, flooding the airways with lies.
Thank you, Ms. Porter.
So, closing statements, you have 45 seconds. This is the last debate before the primary election. Mr. Garvey, go ahead.
Well, to the Latino community, thank you for the currency of friendship all the years. To all the people of California, this has been a journey. But if you feel the quality of your life is the same now that it was 3 years ago, if you believe this crime in the streets that is relentless, if you believe that the crisis at the border is real, if you believe that inflation is stifling your family, then I want you to vote for me. I want you to go to stevegarvey.com and you know in your heart. And tonight was a night where I'm putting my heart and soul into your mind and body, because I want to represent you for 6 years.
Thank you, Mr. Garvey. Congresswoman Lee, 45 seconds.
Well, thank you for inviting us to be with you again. Thank you to the voters who have watched this debate. I think it's important to know that I know what it takes to make life better for everyone in California. I have faced so many obstacles, such as being on public assistance, such as being on food stamps, not being able to afford childcare, having to take my children to class with me. I know the 20 million people who are living one paycheck away from poverty. I know, I see you, I want to work for you in the United States Senate to make life better for you. I know what it takes to fix our democracy and to protect our democracy. I know what it takes to protect our reproductive freedom, and I'm so proud that Reproductive Freedom for All has endorsed me in this campaign, because our democratic rights are being taken away. Thank you again. Please vote for Barbara Lee at ca.com.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Congressman Schiff, final statement.
Senator Feinstein was a giant in this state because she had the ability to take on the big fights, but she also had the ability to get things done. She took on the NRA, and we got an assault weapons ban. She worked with people throughout the state of California to deliver for Californians everywhere. This is what I'm going to bring to the Senate. Senator Feinstein was a good example of the fact that you've got talkers and you've got doers. She was a doer. She got things done. For the Imperial Valley, I want to make sure the mineral wealth of the Imperial Valley helps people in the Imperial Valley. For people in the Central Valley, I want to make sure they have water they can drink. I want to make sure farm workers can have a path to citizenship. I want to make sure those in the north of the state are protected from wildfire and have access to rural health care and broadband. I want to be a senator for all Californians, and that's what I will be.
Thank you, Congressman. Congresswoman Porter, your final comments.
Californians, you don't have to choose between having a career politician who's beholden to special interests and having someone who simply doesn't have a lot of ideas or experience at all. I can give you an example of how I've delivered results without ever being beholden. During the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, when we were scared and we had no resources, just at home watching a graph of rising cases, I went toe-to-toe with Trump's top public health official, and I got him to promise free COVID testing for every single American, regardless of immigration status, regardless of health insurance. That saved lives. You can have results without having a career politician who does Washington's corporate agendas bidding.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman Porter.
Time's up for all of us at this point. Thanks so much for joining us tonight here on NBC4 and Telemundo 52. Special thank you to our partner at LMU. We hope the conversation here with the candidates offered you some clarity this evening. Keep in mind, the primary is 2 weeks out. Your vote counts. We're sitting here with Congressman Adam Schiff, who, as you pointed out, is the front runner in all the polls. Your takeaway from the debate tonight, how do you think you did?
I think I did great, but I'm a little biased, but I enjoyed it. The moderators were, of course, excellent.
Yeah, thanks. So let me ask you one question we didn't ask. You were the Donald Trump hates you the most of any member of the House of Representatives or in Congress. He tweets about you all the time. I know you've said that's a badge of honor. But some say, listen, if for a senator to get anything done, you need to convince 50 other people, sometimes 59 other people, to side with you on a piece of legislation. How much of a burden is the problems that you've had in the past with the Republican Party in the Congress? How much of a burden would that be in the Senate?
First of all, it is a badge of honor to stand up to Donald Trump. And the thing about Trump is he ignores you if he thinks you're ineffective. The people he thinks are effective to standing up to him are the ones that he goes after. So he goes after me a lot. But here's the thing. Even during the worst of the Trump years, when our democracy was hanging by a thread, and I was in constant fights with him, I was still able to work with the Republican Devin Nunes on the Intelligence Committee to get our intelligence bills passed, because we decided we would fight over Russia and Ukraine and the president's corruption, but we would get the work of the intelligence community done, and we did. Through those years, I worked with the Republican Texan and conservative John Culberson to fund NASA and space science. I have worked with Republicans to build mass transit, to get open space bills passed. You have to be able to compartmentalize. And I think actually the Senate is a place where that kind of work is much easier to do. There's a more of a history of working across the aisle, often in private. In fact, even during the impeachment trials, I had Republicans come up to me to tell me what a great job I was doing. And they didn't vote the right way, not all but one, but nevertheless, you have to compartmentalize. That's what I've done in the past. That's what I'll do in the Senate.
We talked about aid being sent overseas. We talked about Ukraine. We talked about Israel, Hamas. What would you say to Armenians in your district right now who feel like they're being overlooked with all that's going on in the world?
Well, I totally understand where they're coming from, and I feel they have been overlooked. I have been weighing in day after day, week after week, year after year with this administration and previous administrations to push back against that murderous dictator in Baku, Aliyev. I warned that we could see exactly what took place, the ethnic cleansing of Artsakh, if the United States kept talking in morally equivalent terms, and sadly that's what happened. But I certainly understand the deep frustration and anger within the community.
Can you do something for them when you get into the U.S. Senate? Will you carry that in?
Absolutely. Well, look, I've been their champion in the House. I will be their champion in the Senate. And they desperately need a champion in the Senate.
Thank you, Congressman. We're going to now talk to one of your opponents, Congresswoman Barbara Lee.
That's an outrage.
That's a Democrat from Oakland, Alameda County, who was the former chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. Thank you very much, and I do appreciate it.
Thank you. Great to see you.
Take care.
So if we could bring in Congresswoman Lee. She's somewhere around here. Well,
let's go back to the studio. Here she comes right here.
Thank you, Congresswoman. So tell us about your sense of this debate tonight.
Well, you guys were great, and I thought it was really very thorough. And I think that voters probably could get a sense of who we are, where we're similar and where we're not. And oftentimes, and I was surprised you guys didn't answer the question in terms of our similarities, because our similarities on voting every now and then are the same. But there are a lot of areas where we're just not similar at all. And I hope that the voters were able to see it. Well, I think just in terms of background experience, for instance, being able to, of course, as a woman of color, see and have a perspective that is unique for the United States Senate. I mean, since 1789, there have only been 3 black women serving in a total of 10 years. And so perspective is important, and being able to represent people in California, everyone, I believe it's important to have representation. Representation really matters.
Right. There's a split in your party over Gaza and the backing of Israel. You said, listen, the Israeli government needs to declare an immediate ceasefire, no questions asked. Just do it now, stop the fighting. That separates you from your opponents, all 3 of them.
But let me just say, I've condemned Hamas over and over again.
We know that, but we're talking about going forward. Right now, stop the fight.
We have to have a permanent ceasefire so that we can first make sure that Israel is secure. But you know what is taking place? The anger, the catastrophic humanitarian disaster is creating a less secure Israel. It's counterproductive to Israel's security.
Would you tie aid to Israel to that notion of an immediate ceasefire?
We have to make sure that aid to Israel is conditioned. There are certain standards of warfare that have to be adhered to. There are humanitarian and human rights issues that have to be addressed, like with any country. When you provide money and investments in other countries, there are certain regulations and conditions that have to be met. And now what we're seeing, and everyone sees this is a catastrophe. Again, it's counterproductive to Israel's security. It does not lead to a path to a solution. What we're seeing also is a regional war that's about to break out. I warned after 9/11 that it was going to spiral out of control then. We're seeing that now. And the only pathway to security and peace for the Israelis and the Palestinians is a political and diplomatic solution with all of the Arab nations and, in fact, supporting a 2-state solution, which Netanyahu does not support. That's the policy of the United States.
All right, we are going to send it back to the studio. We thank you for your time tonight and appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Good luck to you, Congresswoman.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Thanks. I want to talk to you a little bit about the debate, things that stood out in your mind tonight.
Well, I thought there were some clear contrasts. I think there's been a little bit of a sense of all Democrats are created equal, and I think tonight exposed some of the ways that we're different. I haven't been in Congress for 25 or 30 years, and I've seen kind of over that time, my adult lifetime, some of the most important challenges facing families, like housing affordability, climate change, childcare costs. Immigration reform, Washington hasn't tackled those. So I think it's important that people got a chance to hear why career politicians who haven't gotten that done think they deserve a promotion. And I also was happy to highlight why I'm a little bit different in terms of never having taken corporate PAC money and not being bought by special interests.
Can we spend a second on the politics of the top two system? I mean, it's a little inside baseball, but Adam Schiff has been spending money designed to elevate Steve Garvey's position within the Republican Party so that he'll be his opponent in the fall. And with a 2-to-1 registration advantage in California, that's a surefire win for him. You criticized that initially. Now you even mentioned Eric Early, another Republican, very conservative, hoping obviously to bring down Steve Garvey's numbers. Is this a flaw in the system where Democrats are now trying to pump up a Republican so you can drag him with you to the fall campaign and ensure your victory?
Well, the situations are not the same. Campaigns should be about honesty and about being truthful. And the truth is, and you heard it for yourselves tonight, Steve Garvey is not 100% behind Donald Trump. And that's what Mr. Schiff, to the tune of millions of dollars, is telling California voters. Eric Early, on the other hand, as you yourself admit, is an unabashed MAGA conservative. He will deliver a nationwide abortion ban. He will be rabid in his
polling at
defense
2%, though.
The race is 2 weeks to go, and we have seen changes in the polling of 10% or more in the last few weeks.
For people who are not quite sure what they're voting for here, what is the job of a U.S. Senator, and what can you do? I mean, California sends billions to Washington. What can you do to bring some of that back into the state?
Especially if you want to get rid of earmarks.
Yeah. So, look, for too long, California's biggest challenges, climate resilience, housing affordability, the costs of childcare, have not been on the top of Washington's agenda. And that is because corporate special interests, big oil, big banks, big pharma, we spend too much of the time passing laws that benefit them. Let me use childcare as an example. Every single economist, from the far right to the far left, Democrat, Republican, will say that if the government would help make childcare more affordable, our economy would grow. That is a win for Democrats and Republicans. With regard to bringing home resources, in the Senate, an earmark system deeply disadvantages California. We get 2 senators, and yet we will get 2% of the earmarks, and yet we are 12% of California's population. And you don't have to take my word for it. Look who got the biggest earmarks last Congress in the Senate. It was states like Alabama.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Porter. Back to you. Oops, back to you.